went to my second home with a property management company to prepare it for rental, and found my sister and her 3 kids living there. She laughed and said Mom and Dad gave me permission. If you don't like it, why don't you call the police? When I said, then I will, she started to panic. The property manager's sedan pulled into the driveway at exactly 2:00 p.m., just as we'd scheduled. Margaret Chen from Riverside Property Solutions stepped out clipboard in hand, ready to do the final walkthrough before listing my lake house for short-term rentals. I'd inherited the place from my grandmother 2 years ago, and after spending thousands on renovations, I was finally ready to start generating income from it. What I wasn't ready for was the sight of my sister Vanessa's rusted Honda Pilot parked on the grass, right where Grandma Rose used to plant her hydrangeas. Is someone staying here? Margaret asked, her professional smile faltering slightly. My stomach dropped. The house was supposed to be empty. I'd been here 3 weeks ago to oversee the new furniture delivery. Everything had been locked up tight, alarm set. Not a single sign of disturbance. Yet now through the front window, I could see curtains that definitely weren't the ones I'd hung. Children's drawings were taped to the glass. There shouldn't be anyone here, I managed, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. We approached the front door together. Before I could even reach for my keys, it swung open. Vanessa stood there in stained sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, looking like she'd just woken up despite the afternoon hour. Behind her, I could hear the unmistakable sounds of children playing, probably too loud for the hardwood floors I'd just had refinished at considerable expense. Oh, hey, Bryony, Vanessa said casually, like I'd just stopped by her own place for coffee. Didn't expect you today. I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Vanessa, what are you doing here? She leaned against the doorframe blocking our entry. Living here, obviously. Mom and Dad said it was fine. The house was just sitting empty anyway. Such a waste of space. Margaret shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly sensing the family drama unfolding. This wasn't what she'd signed up for when I'd hired her firm. Mom and Dad gave you permission, I repeated slowly, to stay in my house. Yeah, they've got keys, remember? Vanessa examined her fingernails, not meeting my eyes. From when Grandma Rose was sick and they used to check on the place. They know Daniel left me. They know I needed somewhere for me and the kids. This place has 4 bedrooms just sitting empty while you live in your fancy condo downtown. My jaw clenched. Yes, I knew our parents had keys. I'd never gotten around to changing the locks after Grandma passed because I trusted them. Clearly that had been a mistake. They had no right to give you permission. This is my property, Vanessa. Grandma left it to me, not them. She shrugged. The gesture was so dismissive it made my blood pressure spike. Well, we're here now. The kids finally have their own rooms after living in that cramped apartment. You should see how happy they are. You wouldn't want to disrupt their lives, would you? Family is supposed to help each other. I could hear the emotional manipulation in her voice, the same tactic she'd used our entire lives. Vanessa was 3 years older and had perfected the art of making me feel guilty for having boundaries. When we were kids, it was borrowing my clothes without asking and returning them ruined. In high school, it was taking money from my wallet and swearing she'd pay me back, which she never did. As adults, it was asking for loans that turned into gifts because she could never quite manage to get her finances together. How long have you been here? I asked, my voice sharper now. About 2.5 weeks. Time flies when the kids are having fun. 2.5 weeks. She'd been squatting in my house for over 2 weeks while I'd been completely unaware. Living my life, planning my rental business, paying utilities on this place, property taxes, insurance. Margaret cleared her throat gently. Miss Patterson, perhaps we should reschedule the walkthrough. I turned to her, embarrassed that she had to witness this disaster. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I had no idea anyone was here. This is completely unauthorized. I understand, she said diplomatically, though I could see the concern in her eyes. Why don't you handle this family matter, and we can reconnect when the property is actually vacant? Vanessa laughed from the doorway. Oh, this is about your little rental scheme. Yeah, that's not happening. We're settled in here. The school bus even knows to pick up the kids from this address now. Something cold settled in my chest. You enrolled them in school using this address. Of course. It's a much better district than where we were before. Tyler is actually making friends for the first time. You wouldn't want to take that away from him, would you? There it was again. The guilt trip. My nephew Tyler was 8 and had always been shy, but that didn't give Vanessa the right to colonize my property. If you don't like it, why don't you call the police? Vanessa said with a smirk, clearly confident I wouldn't. I'm sure they'd love to hear about you kicking your own sister and her 3 kids out onto the street. Mom and Dad would be so disappointed in you. The challenge in her voice, the absolute certainty that she'd won, that she could walk all over me just like she always had, snapped something inside me. I pulled out my phone. Then I will, I said, calmly, already dialing 911. The smirk vanished from her face. Wait, what are you doing? Calling the police like you suggested. Bryony, don't be ridiculous. Her voice changed, taking on a panicked edge. I was joking. You can't seriously be calling the cops on your own sister. Why not? You're trespassing. You have no legal right to be here. Margaret had taken a few steps back, giving us space, but was clearly invested in how this would play out. The 911 operator answered, and I calmly explained the situation, while Vanessa's face went from pink to red to almost white. Please, Bryony, hang up, she said, her voice rising. The kids will be so upset. Tyler has a presentation tomorrow. Emma just made the volleyball team. You can't do this to them. You did this to them, I said, waiting for the operator to transfer me to the non-emergency line since there was no immediate danger. You moved them into a house you had no permission to occupy. A small face appeared behind Vanessa in the doorway. My nephew Liam, who is only 5, looked up at his mother with confused eyes. Mommy, why is Aunt Bryony mad? My heart squeezed painfully, but I didn't hang up. This wasn't about the kids. This was about Vanessa thinking she could take whatever she wanted without consequences. The operator confirmed they'd send an officer to take a statement about the trespassing situation. After I hung up, Vanessa grabbed my arm. Please don't do this. I have nowhere else to go. Daniel isn't paying child support yet. Mom and Dad said you wouldn't mind because the house was just sitting here. Did they actually say that, or did you tell them I'd given permission? Her silence was telling. You lied to them, didn't you? You made them think I knew about this. She released my arm, shoulders slumping. I might have implied that you and I had talked about it. Implied, I repeated. I shook my head, anger and sadness mixing into something bitter. Did you damage anything inside? Of course not. We're taking good care of the place. Better than having it sit empty where anything could happen. I need to see inside now. Vanessa reluctantly stepped aside. What I found made my renovated dream home almost unrecognizable. The living room I'd carefully furnished with a cream-colored sectional, and matching accent chairs looked like a daycare had exploded. Toys everywhere, juice stains on the cushions, crayon marks on the walls. The kitchen had dirty dishes piled in the sink, and what looked like spaghetti sauce splattered on the backsplash I'd had custom tiled. Margaret followed me silently, taking photos for documentation. I could tell she was horrified but staying professional. Upstairs was worse. The master bedroom I'd envisioned for guests who'd pay premium rates now housed Vanessa's mess of clothes, empty energy drink cans, and what looked like 2 weeks of mail scattered across my grandmother's antique dresser. The other bedrooms had been claimed by the kids, complete with their belongings strewn everywhere and stickers on the walls. Vanessa, there's marker on the hardwood in Tyler's room, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Kids will be kids, she said defensively from the hallway. It's not like you have children. You don't understand. I understand that you moved into someone else's property without permission and let your kids damage it. The doorbell rang. The police had arrived quickly, probably a slow day in our suburban area. Officer Martinez introduced himself and asked to speak with me privately on the front porch. I explained the situation as clearly as possible. The house was mine, inherited from my grandmother, with legal documentation to prove it. My sister had somehow obtained keys through our parents and moved in without my knowledge or consent. I had not given anyone permission to stay here, and I wanted her removed for trespassing. Do you have documentation proving ownership? He asked. Yes, I can email you the deed, tax records, everything. He nodded, making notes. And she claims your parents gave permission. My parents don't own the property and have no authority to grant anyone access to it. While Officer Martinez reviewed his notes, I pulled out my phone and started forwarding him the relevant documents. The deed showing the property transfer from Rose Eleanor Patterson to Bryony Michelle Patterson. The tax bills in my name. The insurance policy I'd been paying monthly. Every piece of paper that proved this house belonged to me and me alone. Margaret had stepped to the side, making a phone call to her office. When she finished, she approached me with a concerned expression. Bryony, I hate to add to your stress right now, but I need to let you know this situation could impact our listing timeline significantly. We'll need to do another full inspection once the property is vacant. If there's damage beyond normal wear and tear, you'll need to address it before we can list. I understand, I said, though my mind was calculating the potential costs. Whatever needs to be done. I'm also going to recommend we document everything thoroughly today. Photos written, descriptions, the works. If this turns into a legal matter, you'll want evidence of the condition she left the property in. That thought hadn't even occurred to me yet. The idea that this could escalate into actual litigation made my stomach turn. But Margaret was right. I needed to protect myself. Officer Martinez went inside to speak with Vanessa. Through the open door, I could hear her voice getting increasingly desperate as she realized I wasn't backing down. She was using every manipulation tactic in her arsenal, talking about the kids' well-being, about how I used to be nice, about how Grandma Rose would be disappointed in me. That last one stung, even though I knew it was manipulative garbage. Grandma Rose had always been a practical woman who believed in personal responsibility. She'd raised 4 kids during tough economic times and had never tolerated excuses or laziness. If anything, she'd probably be furious that someone was taking advantage of property she'd worked hard to maintain. Margaret stood beside me, quiet support in her presence. After a moment, she spoke softly. "For what it's worth, you're handling this remarkably well. A lot of property owners would be screaming right now." "I'm screaming internally," I admitted. "That counts as restraint in my book." I could hear Vanessa's voice rising inside, asking to speak with me directly. Officer Martinez appeared at the door. "Miss Patterson, your sister would like to discuss this with you. You're under no obligation to speak with her, but if you're willing, I can mediate the conversation." I considered refusing. Part of me wanted to just let the police handle everything and avoid another confrontation, but another part of me wanted Vanessa to hear directly from me why this wasn't okay, why I wasn't going to be her doormat anymore. "Fine," I said, following him inside. Vanessa was sitting on my cream sectional mascara running down her face. The kids had been moved to the kitchen with a second officer who was apparently trying to distract them with a game on his phone. I could hear Liam's giggles carrying through the house. "Bryony, please," Vanessa started. "Can we just talk about this like adults?" "Now you want to talk after you moved in without asking. I tried to call you a few times, but you were always busy with work. I figured it would be easier to just move in and explain later." The audacity of that logic left me momentarily speechless. Officer Martinez gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. "You figured wrong. This is my property, Vanessa. Mine. Not the family's, not Mom and Dad's. Mine. Grandma left it specifically to me, because you were always her favorite." Vanessa shot back, bitterness creeping into her tone. "Perfect Bryony, who went to college, got the good job, made all the right choices. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to raise 3 kids alone, and you won't even share one house that you're not even living in." There it was. The resentment that had probably been building for years, finally out in the open. This isn't about favorites. This is about respecting boundaries and property rights. You didn't ask because you knew I'd say no, so you decided to just do whatever you wanted and deal with the fallout later. I needed help. My husband left me with 3 kids and barely any savings. I got laid off from my job. We were about to be evicted from our apartment. What was I supposed to do? Ask for help. Actually ask, not just take. We could have figured something out together, but you didn't give me that option. You stole my keys, lied to our parents, moved in without permission, enrolled the kids in school using a fraudulent address, and damaged my property. Those aren't the actions of someone who needs help. Those are the actions of someone who thinks rules don't apply to them. Vanessa's face crumpled. "I didn't think you'd mind this much. How could you possibly think that you moved into someone else's house without permission? How is that ever okay?" Officer Martinez cleared his throat. "Ladies, I understand this is emotional, but we need to move forward with a resolution. Miss Bryony Michelle Patterson, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" I looked at Vanessa, really looked at her. She was 38 years old, 3 years my senior, and she looked exhausted. The resentment I felt was complicated by memories of when we were closer before her life had become one crisis after another, before I'd learned that helping her often meant enabling her. "No charges," I said. Finally, Vanessa breathed. "But she needs to be out today. Completely out with all of her belongings." Vanessa's relief was visible, but Officer Martinez's expression remained serious. "Miss Vanessa, to be clear, if you attempt to return to this property without explicit written permission from your sister, you will be arrested for trespassing. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "And you'll need to provide documentation to the school district that you're no longer residing at this address. Using a false address for school enrollment can have legal consequences." Her face paled. "How long do I have to pack?" she asked, not looking at me. Officer Martinez glanced at his watch. "It's 2:45 now. I'll give you until 7:00 p.m. That's a little over 4 hours. Officer Davis and I will remain on the property to ensure there are no issues." 4 hours to pack up 3 kids' worth of stuff. Vanessa's voice rose again. "That's impossible. You managed to move everything in. You can move it back out," I said, surprised by how firm my voice sounded. "And Vanessa, I'm going to be documenting every bit of damage. You'll be receiving a bill for repairs." "I don't have money for that. I just told you I'm broke." "Then you shouldn't have damaged someone else's property." Margaret had quietly re-entered the house and was already taking photos with her tablet, documenting everything systematically. She photographed the juice stains on the sectional, the crayon marks on the walls, the scratches on the hardwood floors. Each click of her camera's shutter seemed to make Vanessa flinch. "I've handled property disputes before," Margaret said softly. "You're doing the right thing. If you'd let this continue, establishing legal tenancy would have complicated everything." She was right. In our state, someone living somewhere for 30 days could claim tenancy rights, making eviction a lengthy legal process. Vanessa had been here at least 3 weeks. Another week, and I'd have been looking at months of court proceedings. Officer Martinez emerged with Vanessa, who looked like she'd been crying. The kids had been corralled into the living room by the second officer, keeping them distracted. "Miss Patterson," Officer Martinez said to me, "I've explained to your sister that she needs to vacate the property today. Since she entered using keys given by your parents, there's some gray area regarding criminal trespassing charges, but civilly she has no right to be here." "Where am I supposed to go with 3 kids on a few hours' notice?" Vanessa asked. "That's not my problem," I said, and immediately felt terrible for how cold it sounded, but I couldn't back down now. "You created this situation by moving in without permission. Mom and Dad will let us stay with them," she muttered, though she didn't sound confident. "I'm going to need someone to stay here while she packs," Officer Martinez said, "to ensure there's no property damage or disputes about belongings." "I can stay," I said immediately. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable afternoons of my life. Vanessa loudly threw her family's belongings into trash bags and suitcases, while the kids cried confused about why they had to leave suddenly. Tyler kept asking if they'd done something wrong. Emma locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out. Liam clung to his mother's leg, making the packing even more difficult. I wanted to comfort them, to explain that this wasn't their fault, but Vanessa shot me such venomous looks every time I got near the kids that I kept my distance. Margaret had left after the police arrived, promising to be in touch once the situation was resolved. By 6:00 p.m., Vanessa's car was loaded with everything she'd brought into my house. The place looked like a disaster zone, but at least it was empty of unwanted occupants. Officer Martinez had stuck around to ensure a peaceful departure. Before she left, I walked through the house one final time, with Margaret making notes about everything that would need professional attention. The living room walls had sticky residue from where the kids had apparently used tape to hang up their drawings. The kitchen cabinet doors were somehow all misaligned, like someone had yanked them open repeatedly without care. In the bathroom, the grout around the tub was stained pink from what looked like a spilled bottle of children's shampoo. "The master bedroom closet door is off its track," Margaret noted, photographing the damage, "and there's significant scratching on the closet's interior walls." I peered inside and groaned. It looked like someone had dragged furniture or boxes across the walls repeatedly. The paint was gouged in several places deep enough that I could see the drywall underneath. Vanessa appeared at the doorway, car keys in hand. "I'm ready to go." "What happened to the closet?" I asked, pointing. She glanced at it dismissively. "I don't know. It was like that when I got here." "No, it wasn't. I was here 3 weeks ago. These are fresh scratches." "Well, maybe the kids did it playing. They're kids, Bryony. Things happen." The casual way she dismissed the damage, as if it were my responsibility to just accept that her children had destroyed parts of my house, made me angrier than almost anything else she'd done that day. "This wasn't an accident. This was negligence. You're going to pay for this," I said quietly. "All of it," she snapped. "Sure, add it to all the other bills I can't pay. You'll be waiting a long time." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Miss Vanessa, you need to leave now. If you have everything from the property, it's time to go." She turned to face me one last time. "I hope you're happy. You get your precious house back, and my kids get to sleep on Mom and Dad's floor. Real nice, Bryony. Real classy." "You made your choices," I said. "I'm just dealing with the consequences of them." Tyler appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked at me with confused, sad eyes that made my chest ache. "Bye, Bryony," he said softly. "Bye, Tyler. Take care of your mom." Vanessa put her hand on his shoulder and guided him toward the door, but not before I saw her wiping tears from her eyes. For just a second, I wondered if I was being too harsh. Then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my property and rights, and my resolve hardened again. Emma and Liam were already in the car, visible through the front window. Emma had her arms crossed and was staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the house. Liam's face was pressed against the window, his little hand waving goodbye to nobody in particular. Officer Davis, who'd been quiet for most of the ordeal, spoke up as Vanessa loaded Tyler into the car. "You know, I see situations like this more often than you'd think. Family members, assuming they can use each other's properties without permission. It almost never ends well. How does it usually end? I asked. Exactly like this. Police intervention, damaged relationships, legal bills. Sometimes worse when people refuse to leave peacefully. You did the right thing calling us when you did. Another week or two, and she might have established tenancy rights, and then you'd be looking at a formal eviction process that could take months. That thought made me shudder. I'll never forgive you for this, Vanessa said as she buckled Liam into his car seat. You chose money over family. I chose boundaries over being taken advantage of, I corrected. There's a difference. Mom and Dad are going to hear about this. I'm sure they will from you, with your version of events. She slammed the car door and drove off without another word, leaving deep tire tracks in the front lawn from where she'd parked on the grass. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. Margaret put a hand on my shoulder. I know that wasn't easy. No, I said, it really wasn't. The hard part isn't over yet, unfortunately. Let me walk you through what we're looking at for repairs. We spent the next hour going through her detailed notes and photos. Beyond the obvious cosmetic damage, there were concerns about potential issues that weren't immediately visible. The amount of moisture damage in the bathroom suggested possible mold growth behind the walls. The kitchen's plumbing would need to be checked because the sink was draining slowly, possibly due to food debris being washed down without a properly maintained disposal. Conservatively, you're looking at $6,000 to $8,000 in repairs, Margaret said, scrolling through her tablet. That's assuming we don't find anything worse when contractors start opening things up. My stomach sank. $8,000. That would wipe out most of the money I'd budgeted for marketing in the first few months of management fees. Can any of this wait? I asked, already knowing the answer. Not if you want to rent it. The property needs to be in pristine condition for guests. Even minor issues will result in bad reviews, which will tank your bookings. She paused, then added more gently, I'm sorry, Bryony. I know this isn't what you planned for today. Nobody plans for their sister to squat in their house, I said, trying for humor, but landing somewhere closer to bitter resignation. After Margaret left, I sat alone in the empty living room staring at the juice stains on my ruined sectional. The house felt different now, tainted somehow by what had happened. Grandma Rose's sanctuary, the place I'd spent so many happy summers, had been violated by the one person who should have respected it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Vanessa just showed up here with the kids. She's hysterical. What did you do? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Ask her what she did first. The response came immediately. She said you called the police on her for no reason, that you're forcing your own niece and nephews onto the street. Of course that's what she'd said. The victim narrative perfectly crafted to make me the villain. I took a deep breath and called my mother instead of texting. She answered on the first ring. Bryony Marie Patterson, what is going on? The use of my full name like I was 10 years old and in trouble for breaking curfew immediately put me on the defensive. Did Vanessa tell you she moved into the lake house without my permission? She said you knew about it, that you'd offered to let her stay there temporarily. That's a lie, Mom. A complete lie. I had no idea she was there until I showed up today with the property manager to prepare it for rental. She'd been squatting there for 3 weeks, damaged the property, enrolled the kids in school using a fraudulent address, and refused to leave when I asked. So yes, I called the police because she was trespassing. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear Vanessa's voice in the background, probably spinning more of her story. She said you gave them permission to get keys from us, my mother said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. I never gave anyone permission to give her keys. You and Dad had those keys for emergencies, not to distribute to whoever wanted them. Did you even call me to verify before handing them over? Another silence, which was answer enough. She was desperate, Bryony. Daniel left her with nothing. She was about to be evicted. What was she supposed to do? Ask for help. Actually ask me not lie about having permission. We could have figured something out together, but she didn't give me that option. She just took what she wanted and expected me to deal with it. I could hear my father's voice now, too, everyone apparently gathering in the kitchen for this conversation. The kids were crying in the background, which made me feel terrible, even though I knew I'd done nothing wrong. Your sister needs family support right now, my mother said, her tone softening into guilt-trip territory. I know she made mistakes, but those children are innocent. They are, I said, but that doesn't mean Vanessa gets to colonize my property without consequences. Mom, there's over $8,000 in damage. She let the kids draw on the walls, spill things on furniture I just bought, scratch up the floors I just had refinished. This wasn't just staying somewhere temporarily. This was careless destruction of someone else's property. $8,000. My mother's voice faltered. That can't be right. I have photos and a professional assessment from the property management company. I'm happy to send them to you. Send them, my father said, apparently having taken the phone. I want to see what we're talking about here. The aftermath wasn't pretty. My mother called within the hour, hysterical about how I'd called the police on my own flesh and blood. My father sent a long text about family loyalty and Christian charity, conveniently ignoring that they'd enabled this situation by giving Vanessa the keys. I sent them both a detailed email explaining exactly what had happened, including photos of the damage to my property. I also informed them that I'd be changing all the locks and they would no longer have access to the house. This led to more angry calls about how I was pushing the family away and would regret it when I needed help someday. The next 2 weeks were consumed with repairs. Professional cleaners came first, followed by painters to cover the crayon marks. The hardwood flooring guy I had originally hired had to come back to sand and refinish the damaged sections. The cream sectional needed professional upholstery cleaning that only partially removed the stains, so I ended up having to replace it entirely. New locks were installed on every door, and I upgraded the security system to include cameras. The final bill for all repairs and replacements came to just over $8,000. I documented everything meticulously and had my lawyer draft a letter to Vanessa demanding reimbursement. I knew I'd never see that money, but I wanted the paper trail. Margaret and I finally completed a proper walkthrough 3 weeks after the initial disaster. The house looked immaculate again, ready for its first guests. You know, Margaret said, as we finished up in 20 years of property management, I've seen a lot of family disputes over real estate. You handled this better than most. A lot of people would have caved to the guilt. I almost did, I admitted. Hearing those kids cry was awful. Their mother put them in that position, not you. She gambled that you wouldn't enforce your rights, and she lost. The house started generating rental income within a month. The location was perfect for summer vacationers and fall leaf peepers, and I priced it competitively. The first guest left a glowing review mentioning how clean and well-maintained everything was. My parents didn't speak to me for 2 months. Radio silence, not even a text on my birthday. Then one evening, my father showed up at my condo unannounced. "Can I come in?" he asked, looking older and more tired than I remembered. I let him in, offered coffee, and waited. "Your mother and I had Vanessa and the kids staying with us." He started. "It's been challenging. The house is too small. The kids are bouncing off the walls. Vanessa isn't looking for work or trying to find her own place. She just complains about how unfair you were." I didn't respond, just sipped my coffee. "I understand now why you did what you did," he continued. "We've been enabling her for years, haven't we? Every time she makes a mess of things, we clean it up. We give her money she doesn't pay back. We make excuses for her choices." "Yes," I said simply. "She told us you knew she was staying at the lake house," he said. "She said you'd offered it, and then changed your mind out of nowhere because of some rental scheme." "I never offered. I didn't know she was there until I showed up with the property manager." He rubbed his face wearily. "I should have called you to confirm. I should have known better. Your sister has a way of bending the truth to suit her needs." "What changed your mind?" I asked. "She asked us to co-sign a lease for her. The landlord called to verify our income and employment because her credit is apparently terrible. We had no idea how bad her finances really were. She's got collections agencies calling the house. Your mother found out she hasn't filed taxes in 3 years. I'd suspected Vanessa was bad with money, but this sounded like a whole other level of dysfunction." "I'm not apologizing for enforcing my property rights," I said firmly, "but I'm sorry the situation is difficult for you and Mom." "We're not asking you to apologize. Well, your mother might be, but that's her stubbornness talking. I came to apologize to you. We had no right to give Vanessa access to your house. We violated your trust, and I'm sorry." It was the first time in a long time that my father had genuinely apologized for anything. I felt some of the anger I'd been carrying start to ease. "I accept your apology," I said, "but I meant what I said about the locks. I can't have a repeat of this situation." "Understood. That's more than fair." We talked for another hour, clearing the air about a lot of things that had been building for years. He admitted they'd always favored Vanessa because she seemed to need more help, but recognized now that the help had become enabling. I shared how invisible it had made me feel, growing up, always the responsible one who didn't get attention because I had my life together. My mother took longer to come around. She held on to her anger for another month before finally calling me with a stiff, formal apology that sounded rehearsed, but it was something, and I accepted it. Vanessa never apologized. Not for the trespassing, not for the damage, not for the lies. She moved into a small apartment in the next county with help from our parents, who co-signed her lease despite the risks. According to my father, she still complains about me regularly painting herself as the victim of a cruel, unfeeling sister who cared more about profits than her own niece and nephews. I didn't mention that Emma's age was never clearly established during the chaos, but from context clues, she'd just made the volleyball team and seemed old enough to lock herself in a bathroom during an emotional crisis. I estimated she was probably around 12 or 13, old enough to understand what was happening, which made the whole situation even more painful. The rental property exceeded my financial projections in its first year. I invested the profits into upgrading the dock and adding a hot tub amenities that allowed me to increase my rates. Guest reviews consistently praised the cleanliness, location, and attention to detail. Some became repeat customers, booking the same weeks year after year. Occasionally, I felt guilty when I thought about the kids. They hadn't asked for any of this, but I reminded myself that protecting my boundaries wasn't the same as being cruel. Vanessa's poor planning didn't constitute an emergency on my part, and teaching the kids that actions have consequences might actually benefit them in the long run. A year after the incident, I ran into Vanessa at a grocery store. We made eye contact across the produce section, and I could see her deciding whether to approach or avoid me. She chose avoidance, turning her cart down a different aisle. I felt relieved more than anything else. The property management company sent me a year-end summary showing I'd earned nearly $40,000 in rental income after their fees and expenses. Margaret included a personal note congratulating me on a successful first year and thanking me for my business. I framed the first dollar I'd earned from the rental and hung it in my home office, a reminder that standing up for myself had been worth it. Grandma Rose had left me the house because she believed I'd take care of it and make something good out of it. I like to think she'd be proud of how I'd handled the situation, even though it meant conflict with family. My relationship with my parents slowly improved. We'd never be as close as we once were, but we'd established a new normal based on mutual respect rather than obligation. They stopped asking me to help Vanessa financially, which was its own kind of relief. The lake house became my sanctuary, a place I visit between rentals to do maintenance and enjoy the peace. Sitting on the dock, Grandma Rose had loved. Watching the sunset paint the water in shades of orange and pink, I felt grateful for the inheritance and grateful for the strength to protect it. Vanessa's life continued its chaotic trajectory. Through my parents, I heard about job losses, boyfriend drama, and constant financial struggles. Part of me wanted to reach out to offer some kind of olive branch, but the larger part of me knew that any opening I gave would be exploited. Some relationships are better maintained at a distance, and some people will always see kindness as weakness. The property management business taught me something valuable beyond just financial returns. It taught me that my worth wasn't measured by how much I sacrificed for others, or how many times I said yes when I wanted to say no. It taught me that protecting what was mine, what I'd worked for and invested in, wasn't selfish. It was necessary. 3 years after the trespassing incident, my rental property had become one of the most successful listings in Margaret's portfolio. She asked if I'd ever consider purchasing additional properties to build a small rental empire. I thought about it, did the math, and decided to start looking. Grandma Rose's house had given me more than just rental income. It had given me confidence, financial security, and most importantly, the clarity to see that choosing yourself isn't the same as abandoning others. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is enforce boundaries that teach people they can't walk all over you. The last time I spoke to Vanessa was at a family Christmas gathering I reluctantly attended. She was cordial but cold, keeping her kids away from me, like I might contaminate them with my selfishness. I didn't try to change her mind or defend my actions. I simply enjoyed the dinner, helped my mother with dishes, and left early to beat the traffic. Driving home that night, I felt at peace with how everything had unfolded. The property was thriving, my finances were secure, and I'd learned to stop setting myself on fire to keep others warm. That was its own kind of revenge, the best kind, really. Not hurting her back, but simply refusing to be hurt anymore. The lake house stands as a testament to that lesson, its windows glowing warmly for paying guests who respect the property and follow the rules. Sometimes I drive past just to see it lit up at night, remembering the chaos of that afternoon when everything changed. When I finally found the courage to say no and mean it, consequences be damned. And you know what? The sky didn't fall. My family didn't completely disintegrate. Life went on just with healthier boundaries and a much better bank balance. Grandma Rose, wherever she was, had given me exactly what I needed, even if I hadn't realized it at the time. Not just a house, but the opportunity to discover my own strength. That's what made it all worth it in the end.